So yeah, one of the main things we've said is let's unwrap some dbtvault, some new features for dbtvault this Christmas, and I'm hoping that everyone is going to enjoy their presents. So let's go. It's not working. There you go. So I think let's go back to the beginning as to why we built and started developing dbtvault in the first place. The Datavault 2 method, I think a lot of people can agree, it needs a tool if you want to do it seriously. Apart from anything else, there are a lot of tables to build. There is some complexity in it that should be automated where possible, but apart from anything else, it also owes itself to automation and therefore a tool. It's highly templated, hubs, links, satellites, etc. They're all built on a template, and they're all, give or take, fairly easy to generate. So why not? As developers, we wanted a developer's tool, something that we could use to quickly iterate, to learn with, to experiment with, and something that we could also use in production where needed and as and when needed as well. We also wanted a robust ecosystem, so something that if we built, it wasn't going to fall over, it wouldn't be too difficult to maintain, it would be built on something that itself was also robust. So I'll get onto that in a second with DBT. The other thing as well is, data warehouse testing is quite hard. There's lots of moving parts, there's lots of layers in it, there's lots of things, depending on how you automate it, that can go wrong. And we want testing to be able to catch those and, again, make it an even more robust warehouse and make it usable as well. So with all these things in mind, this is what we wanted for dbtvault. This is why we wanted to create dbtvault. Around the time we were thinking, how are we going to do this? We found dbt. So a quick recap on what dbt is, and dbt to the rescue, as it were. It offers a very powerful way to template SQL using Ginger, which is a templating language that dbt uses underneath the hood. It's very extensible, so you can build custom packages and libraries for it that you can add to it and integrate into the dbt ecosystem. And it also is really great for kind of augmenting a developer's natural workflow. So you want to rapidly iterate, you want to try something, okay, that hasn't worked, I want to try a different way of doing that. I want to continuously iterate and improve and get results, essentially. So dbt allows us to do that, and building dbtvault on dbt, let's go back, it gives us a strong, robust foundation. So in the last few years, and especially in the last few months, dbt has been growing pretty much exponentially. And as dbt has been growing, dbtvault has been growing with it. People going to dbt, they may or may not be Datavault users, but they will eventually come across dbtvault because it is an official package. Maybe they're using dbt to build a data warehouse. They find dbtvault. The success of dbt has been helping dbtvault significantly. They may also find dbtvault or want a tool for Datavault 2, come across dbtvault, find dbt as well. So yeah, it works both ways. But dbt is now very mainstream. You hear about it in a lot of places. You've got big corporations using it. They are getting a lot of funding. They've had a few really big crowdfunding kind of campaigns recently. Because it's open source as well, it owes itself to getting very popular because it's free and people can just use it and pick it up. But there are also enterprise offerings. So any companies that come to it and say, okay, we really want to use this, but we're not quite sure because it's open source. There is an enterprise offering. They've got an online IDE with dbt Cloud. So it really covers kind of both ends of the spectrum. because it also supports multiple platforms, you've got Snowflake, you've got BigQuery, you've got Redshift, it pretty much supports most of the top contenders in the data warehousing landscape. So things like Redbricks as well. And they are continuously releasing new updates, new features. The community is contributing to it. There's just a lot going for it. Going on to the point of the community is massive. They've got thousands and thousands of people on their Slack channel. You can ask a question. I'm frequently in there asking questions about things, and usually you'll get a reply. They're very friendly, the devs and the community. It's just a nice place to be. As well, because it's cloud native, so they do have the dbt cloud, so that can be integrated into your development stack very easily. The CLI version can also be, because it's Python based, it's a Python library, that can also be really easily implemented and integrated into your pipelines and your stack generally. It all round is, again, it's got a lot going for it. The thing I mentioned earlier about it's growing, and especially in recent months, they announced this week that they are releasing dbtvault version 1, I think either this week or next week. Very, very excited for that, and dbtvault will be supporting that as soon as possible as well. So that's gonna be very interesting. There's lots of new features coming in there that we're really excited about. So the road so far, I've touched on a few of these. But let's go right back to the beginning. So October 2019 is when we first released 0.1. If I remember correctly, we literally just had hub syncs and satellites. We used to call them hub_template, link_template. It was a bit clunky, but it worked. We could do. It was better than doing it by hand for sure, but it wasn't quite there. So 0.4, a few more features. I think I believe at that point we'd got rid of the _template. We'd added a few more features. We'd reduced the amount of metadata that all the templates needed, working a bit better. But still not quite there, but very happy with it. May 2020, dbtvault 0.6. I believe at this point is when we started releasing more table types. We had things like Effectivity Satellites. We really improved how our staging macros work, and generally just improving the quality of life, making it easier to use, adding more guidance in the documentation for how to do particular things, and just generally making everyone's lives easier when they're using dbtvault. So 0.78, October 2021, that was a lot more recent. We've been doing a number of bug fixes. We've been increasing the test coverage significantly. I believe now we've got about 700 tests for each platform. And December 2021, so 13th of December, as mentioned earlier, that is when we are releasing 0.79. So we're going to go into a deep dive into 0.79 in a second. 2022. So I'm really excited for 2022, to be honest. It's going to be a fantastic year. We're going to finally have more platforms that dbtvault works on. We're looking at, for example, BigQuery and SQL Server. Again, we'll get onto more depth into that in a second. We're looking at more frequent releases as well. As you can see here, it was quite slow to begin with. October, November, that's not too bad. But then May 2020, and then May to October, it's not as fast as we'd like. And part of that is because it's been in a good place for a while, but it is still lacking new features. We've been improving a lot on the features that are there, but we want to add more things and get dbtvault doing more, covering more of the Datavault 2 standard, adding more table types, again, new platforms, all kinds of things. We want to do more in the business vault. We want to do more automation. We just want to do more as much as we can. We've got a much larger team now. So it was, I believe up until, so 1, 2, and 3, October, November, May 2020, that was mostly just me, a few other people. But since, this year, we've had a much larger team, and it's been getting a lot more rapid. We've got better pipelines in place for automating the delivery. We've got a much cleaner documentation process. It feels, everything seems a lot faster and a lot cleaner and a lot more structured in our development approach. internally. So really happy about that. And we're also looking to get more community involvement. So in terms of contributing, people haven't been able to contribute very easily up until this point, because we've got a large test harness that's all kind of bespoke and custom. It's all custom Python test harness. The setting up the development environment is not as straightforward as typing a few commands and installing it. There is a little bit of setup around it. So we have, we do want to write guidance on this, and we do want to have a proper contribution process. And I believe once we've got that, which we're aiming to do early next year, it's going to mean there's going to be a lot more community involvement. There's going to be features that we may not necessarily get time to do ourselves, or features that we may not be able to prioritize, for example, being able to, the community being able to develop them. Once you've got a community behind you, as we've seen with DBT, its growth is even more rapid. And we've already got a community, but once that community can start contributing back their own work. So, we've got a few people who want to help us with BigQuery, want to help us with Postgres, and just can't quite do that just yet because the contribution guidelines and process isn't quite there. So once we've got that, sky's the limit, really looking forward to that. So let's move on to 0.79 then. So next release, 13th December, as mentioned, we are finally approaching the business vault. So we've got point in time tables, bridge tables, and we've got some additional raw vault structures coming in as well. So extended tracking satellites, and we're significantly improving how multi-active satellites work. They aren't, multi-active satellites in particular aren't as common as some of the other structures, but they are really useful for certain use cases. And the code we have at the moment, they do exist in dbtvault. The code we have at the moment is a bit confusing. The implementation is a bit odd. The amount of metadata you need can be a bit overwhelming. And yeah, I mean, I'll get into it more in a second, but essentially lots of really nice improvements coming in. So really excited about that. It'll be a lot easier to use those. So we're also looking to do quality of life improvements. So I don't actually know why that's a bit of an error there. Quality of life hashing configurations, we've already got that in. That's 0.78. Sorry about that. But yeah, we have introduced hashing configurations in 0.78, so people can provide what null placeholder they want and what concatenation string they want for the hashing processes in dbtvault. That's gone down pretty well. We've had a lot of feedback about that being really useful for a lot of people. We want to expand how configurable dbtvault is in the future as well. It's one of the things we're really focusing on for next year. So along with that, bug fixes, we're looking to improve how composite primary keys work. They are allowed, and they can be provided in dbtvault, but they don't work as consistently as we'd like. And we've done a number of kind of across the board fixes in there to make them act more consistently. And we've also improved some of the documentation around those as well, and how and when to do that kind of stuff. And also incremental load. So we've had a number of bug reports on our GitHub about incremental load being a bit odd. And a lot of that is a lack of guidance on how the staging area should be set up. So we're really looking to improve that guidance. Some of it was on our implementation of things though. So we have, where necessary, improved the consistency of how incremental loading works, and also increased our test coverage on it. So to make sure, that doesn't come up again. That's 0.79. So let's have a deeper dive into point in time tables. So for those of you who don't know, point in time tables are a query helper table that lives in the business role. The idea is that they span across multiple satellites for a given hub or link. And they provide a snapshot over the data for the satellites that they are created on for the hubs and links, so that we can get the data for a particular point in time for those hubs and links. And it provides the equijoin capabilities, so that it really helps with performance. That's why they're a query helper, because it helps with the performance of your queries in your reporting layer. And it deals with all the stuff that you would want you'd expect it to deal with, such as time variation between records coming in and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, point in time tables, they are also quite complex in terms of implementing them. So creating a template and putting in dbtvault is that a lot more people are going to be able to access them, and it's going to be one of those things that's kind of a no-brainer because, well, there's a template for it now. There's lots of different custom implementations out there for point in time tables, and some of them, some of them work, some of them don't work, some of them don't quite fulfill all the standards. Our implementation isn't yet perfect. We do want to improve on it over time, but we believe it's a really good start, and it'll get people started using point in time tables in dbtvault, and we really appreciate any feedback. So start using them if you need to. You don't always need point in time tables. Start using them if you need to, and give as much feedback as you possibly can. We'd really appreciate it. So pretty much the same for bridge tables. They work very similar to point in time, except they work over hubs and links instead of hubs, links, and satellites. The idea is it's a snapshot of the key structures using the business keys and primary keys. And we also sometimes add aggregates in there, so that by the time your data gets to your MART layers and your information layer, the data is already aggregated, and you don't have to worry about putting all of that logic in your reports, and increasing the computational load in the reports means that your reports load faster. Everyone's happy. So yeah, Bridge and Prits are kind of a pair. They both deal with different parts of the business vault and query, helping with reporting after the business vault as well. So the other new structure mentioned is extended tracking satellites. So the idea of a record tracking satellite, extended tracking satellite, sorry, is that they record the ingestion of every record into a satellite. And this helps with things such as replaying loads, rebuilding source systems, and things such as if you've got missing data, you can use the record tracking satellite as a kind of, it's very much an audit table. You can go back and see, okay, this is when the data stopped loading for that particular table, all kinds of things. They're very useful. So onto the multi-actor satellite improvements that I mentioned earlier. So at the moment, we have, like I said, the code is more complex than it needs to be. There's quite a lot of joins and window functions in there that we can take out. And because of those, partly because of those joins and some other logic we've got in there, the complexity and the logic is really hard. The complexity of the SQL makes the logic really hard to follow. Now, this wouldn't normally be a problem because obviously it's generated. Most people don't need to look at the actual SQL that's generated, they just use it. But because the SQL that gets generated is quite complicated, that means that there are actually there's more metadata that needs to be provided to the macro to generate that SQL. So by reducing the complexity of the SQL, we actually reduce the complexity, the amount of metadata that needs to be provided. So it's easier for the user to use, and also easier to extend. So if any company or user wants to modify it for their own needs for whatever reason, it'll be easier to follow that logic and modify where necessary. And also easier for us to maintain if we're not staring at a bit of code for 3 hours trying to figure out what the hell it does. So generally all round happiness is good. It comes from reducing the complexity. So like I said here at the bottom here, we've got performance and simplicity. So yeah, because we're reducing the complexity and removing a lot of the joins, it's going to be more performant naturally as a result of that. And we've also now got more test coverage as a result, because we wanted to make sure that once we simplified the multi-actor satellites, they were still working the same way as before we simplified them. And we're really happy to report the test still passed, so we haven't broken anything in there. And we've also got more test coverage now as a result. So again, all round much better. So let's have a look at the new roadmap. So this is also published on the dbtvault documentation roadmap. All these so 0.710 and what you get from 0.710, etc. That's all on the dbtvault docs if anyone wants to see. Essentially 0.710, 0.8 and 0.9 we're hoping to to get onto all these versions next year. 0.710, we're going to be looking, so we've simplified multi-active satellites. Next, we want to simplify how effectivity satellites work. And again, like I said, Pits and Bridges, they're in as a first release. I'm very happy with them, and the team is also very happy with them. But we want to, from community feedback and from our own use, from using it for ourselves and clients and for our own projects, for example, we want to improve them as much as possible and add more functionality. That's 0.710. Or of course, quality of life. Pretty much every update, we always try and include new features, new structures if we can, and quality of life to make it everything easier to use, and bug fixes. So quality of life and bug fixes, you can probably pretty much guarantee are going to be in every release as much as possible. So anyway, moving on to 0.8x. I say 0.8x because for a first version, so for 0.8.0, we want to release BigQuery and SQL Server. For that initial release, BigQuery and SQL Server support. So for that initial release, it's just going to be hubs, links, to satellites, so that at least we've got that and people can start using it. And then as we go through different versions of 0.8, 0.81, 2, 3, we'll add more structures, more functionality to those initial fundamental building blocks of Datavault. So we'll add things like transactional links, we'll add the effectivity satellites, multi-actives, et cetera, as we go through. As soon as we hit 0.9, our aim is to start including even more platforms. So once we've kind of put BigQuery and SQL Server in as our first two additionally supported platforms after Snowflake, that will make it a lot easier for us to just build out even more platform functionality. So we've got a lot of requests and people asking about Databricks, number of clients, number of users on GitHub, people in Slack asking about Databricks, Postgres as well. So one of our community, I won't name him, I haven't actually asked, but one of our community is currently working on a Postgres port, and that might be something that they're going to be contributing in the new year. So really excited about that. And Azure Synapse and Redshift are also two things that have been asked about a lot by our community and clients. So the thing with Redshift as well is because Redshift is based quite a lot on Postgres, Redshift support should be quite simple after Postgres. So that's why we're prioritizing Postgres first, because Redshift should come quite easily after that. So yeah, that's 0.710, 0.8, and 0.9. And this may change, as we go, that there might be things that we add to it. I don't want to fundamentally change what we've said here, though. I really want to aim for 0.8 to be BigQuery SQL Server. 0.9 will be other platforms, but it doesn't mean we're not going to add new features to those platforms. It's not just going to be those platforms, for example. So let's have a deeper dive into the effectivity satellite improvements for 0.710. So they kind of suffer from a similar issue as multi-active satellites I mentioned earlier. There's too many columns in there. Some of the columns that are in there have confused naming. So for example, effective from, we have had a lot of questions about what that exactly means. It's a business effective date. What does that exactly mean? Does effective from make sense? You might have a date in your business that has the word effective in it already. Effectivity might mean something else in your business. So it can get confusing for various different reasons. And regardless, Dan has recently released some comments on this, and we now want to call it applied date off the back of that. So applied date makes a lot more sense. It's a lot clearer and a lot less likely to cause confusion. So as we're reducing the columns as well, the kind of what we want, because we're reducing the number of columns, it's going to mean the metadata is a lot simpler. There's going to be less metadata. Again, similar to how the multi-active satellites are going to be changed. The last thing that we want to change, and again, we've had a lot of feedback about this, having start and end date columns in the effective from. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. I won't go into too much detail, but there is a good reason for it. However, we believe it makes a lot more sense just to have one column that's essentially a Boolean flag that says whether it's active or not, rather than necessarily having to apply a business rule to look at the start and end dates and find out or work out whether it is active. You just have a flag that says, I am active, I am not active. Again, a lot simpler, reducing the amount of columns, reducing the amount of metadata, all around just making it easier to use. So we're really excited about that as well. So a bit more detail. I think I actually already went through a lot of this. BigQuery and MS SQL Server support. So we're currently actively developing it. We've got a number of engineers behind the scenes working on this. We've got, like I said, for Snowflake, we have about 600-700 individual tests that run, and we've got the same amount for BigQuery and SQL Server as well. So our test suite is very kind of expandable and extensible, and we've been able to get it so that we can run the same tests on each platform as you'd expect. So that's really good. That's really speeding up our development process and giving us the confidence that we are on the right lines and that it does work correctly in different platforms. I could spend another whole hour talking about some of the challenges we faced for BigQuery and SQL Server. If anyone has any questions on that, feel free to ask. But essentially, it's going to be, we've had some issues around data types and the way joins and window functions work and all kinds, but we've managed to get over a lot of those hurdles. It's been fun, actually. So like I said, initial release, HubSync satellites, and then for the remainder of 0.8, we want to work on adding additional stuff. And onto the dbtvault CLI. So this is really exciting. I would like to heavily caveat that this is very much a prototype. It's not going to be ready for public release for a few months yet. It's something we kind of at the moment do in our spare time here and there, and we're kind of purely experimenting with it. But I think, you know, Q2 next year probably we would like to start trialing it with a few people and seeing, you know, testing the waters with it. But the idea of the dbtvault CLI, we have mentioned it before in previous meetings. Essentially, it's going to be like a companion tool for dbtvault that allows you to do kind of additional things as a kind of power user, really. So if you want to generate your models, your model files, you want to generate your documentation stubs, maybe you want to generate an entity relationship diagram from your dbtvault project, all these kinds of additional things that you want to do in a data warehouse project that maybe dbt and dbtvault don't already do. This is kind of, we want it to augment the natural workings of dbtvault and dbt. So just as a kind of sneak peek, I've been working on this kind of, again, in my spare time the last few weeks, but this is an entity relationship diagram using GraphViz that's generated directly from the dbt artifacts, so the manifest.json and the catalog.json. And I've been working on a kind of algorithm to get this looking neater. And for those of you who know, graphing algorithms and making graphs look pretty is a very difficult kind of, it's kind of quite a complex issue in the industry. But I've been working on something to make it look vaguely pretty. And this is all completely generated from the dbt artifacts, as I say. So you point the code at the artifacts and it goes away and figures out what your relationships and connections this should be. This is looking at the Snowflake TPCH worked example that we have available in our documentation, generated directly from there. So yeah, it's very early days. Like I say, it's not likely to be released Q1, but some point next year. We want to start trialing this and seeing where it can go, and just generally, we're very excited about this. I've personally had a lot of fun developing this. It's really nice to see something graphical come out. So yeah, for those of you very keen-eyed and quick there, you may have seen the next slide. It's a bit of a spoiler, but essentially, you may have noticed on the meetup we advertise a Santa's secret announcement, and essentially that is we are developing a dbtvault website. So we're going to have a product website. It's going to be a one-stop shop for everything dbtvault. We're going to have it's still very much in development. We're still thinking about what's going to be on the website, and what's going to be there and what we want there, but we've got a few ideas. For example, we might have a developers blog to give updates on the development process and things that our developers have done day to day. Of course, there's going to be a link out to the dbtvault documentation. We might have a forum, for example. The sky's the limit, really. There's a lot of ideas we have floating around, and we're very excited for it. So yeah. I think that's everything I had to say on that one. Yep. So, one last thing. Yeah, our graphics guy has done an amazing job on this. I'm really, really liking, for example, the 1, 2, 3 on the left there. I think that looks fantastic. Really, really, really excited to see this live. Okay, so we also had an interview with one of our users, a company called Mirvac. They're a property development company in Australia. Neil and I asked them a few questions about why they chose dbtvault, what their key observations and kind of what their experiences were with using dbtvault, any issues they may have had, or any things that they really liked, any feedback they had as well, and essentially why they chose. Firstly, why they choose Datavault 2 in the first place, and what their start to finish journey was for finding a tool for Datavault 2 automation. So that's on YouTube. There's a QR code on the right here. I'll leave it up for a bit, but there's also, you can go to the link below. Failing that, you can also search on YouTube our YouTube channel. So like Datavault Mirvac likely come up with this as well. Leave that on for a few seconds. Okay. All right. And last but not least, we've essentially wanted to kind of explain, over the last few years, the kind of standard architecture that some of our clients, some of our users have been going with, and potentially how you can get started and what a dbtvault project looks like, really. A lot of you will have seen many a diagram that look like very similar to this. You have your source systems on the left. You have some kind of orchestration process to get that data from your source systems over to your staging area. A lot of people use tools like Fivetran. There's Click Replicate, previously called Attunity Replicate, for those of you who may have come across Attunity. Your data gets into your staging area, and then that's essentially where dbtvault and dbt come in. You generate your raw vault. That's all entirely YAML and metadata driven. You live in essentially text files, although luckily they are structured. YAML is a structured language. It's not just text. That's your development environment. You get your raw vault. Now with 0.79 releasing on Monday, you'll be able to do your pits and bridges and start developing your business vault with dbtvault as well. And of course, then you have your presentation layer. So you will have your views built on your pits and bridges, and dashboards built off of that. So you might have your Power BI. You could have, there's a number of Python libraries for doing dashboarding. For example, Plotly Dash. There's a number of things in there. You have your dashboards there. So this is kind of the standard architecture that we've come across, that we've implemented. And we've also, we're partnered with a company called Datavoult as well, that provide a really cool orchestration tool called Datavoult. They've named their company after the tool as well. And essentially, it will allow you to orchestrate this whole thing. So Datavoult orchestrates Fivetran. It can orchestrate Click Replicate as well. It's got native support for dbt and dbtvault. It's all YAML driven, very similar to how dbt works. So you can configure your pipeline via YAML. You can, in Snowflake specifically. So yeah, one thing I should say is that Datavoult currently only supports Snowflake, but I believe they are looking at other platforms. So in Snowflake specifically, you can specify what users' roles, or your access and grants in Snowflake via YAML as well. So it's all in version control, and essentially all infrastructure as code, and it's very powerful. We've had a previous meetup with them, so in September this year, and that's also on our YouTube channel. Again, there's a QR code, but you can also search that. So we really love Datavoult, We can't wait to start using it in more projects. I think we're going to probably start using it internally for our dbtvault development as well. So that'll be really exciting. We can just put everything in one tool rather than having all these different things split up across the place. Yeah, I believe that's everything. Neil, did you want to add anything particular on this slide?
No, nothing really to add to that.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Apart from maybe the presentation layer can also be generated with DBT. So
yeah. So I mean, that's kind of one of the key things across this entire presentation is that, of course, because dbtvault is living in the dbt ecosystem, just because dbtvault doesn't support it yet doesn't mean you can't make your own macros, your own models. You can create all kinds of things for your own use or your company's use. We have a number of clients that have made their own internal package that adds some additional functionality that or extends dbtvault as well. So that's another benefit of living in the dbtvault ecosystem. You if it's SQL, you can do it essentially.